And what I want to do is make a little bit less yellow of the tonality, maybe a little bit more red, and I'm going to also make the background even more darker. The background, I'm going to choose green and the figure red, so there'll be a complementary effect. I'm going to start with the scarlet red, which is opaque. It's a little bit difficult to use. Alizarin here. I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow, and then I'm going to also give it a little bit of green.
C'est tout.
Anthony, and this is the last video of the series called Paint. It's video number 8, and we're dealing with the finish. Now, in painting, the finish is often some coat of substance that you put over the painting in order to finish the painting. It protects it. It protects the surface, and generally this is something like a varnish. Nowadays, there are many acrylic varnishes which are quite useful, and you can find brilliant and opaque finishes that work quite well. In the past, the most common varnish was called Damar varnish. I'm not going to finish my painting like that. I've always found that these extra layers give way to danger to the surface of the painting. In other words, you can have cracks, you can have color discoloration, you can have different problems with this varnish. So I generally don't use it. But as the idea of the creative work, the idea of creation, has this fourth phase, I think we should look at the finish also in terms of creative activity, creative substance. So let's start with the beginning, right? In the beginning, in the creation, there was only this light, Ein Sof, the infinite light. Maybe the light of God, you could think of that. There was nothing else. So when God decided to create, he needed to make another space, to provide some kind of room for something that was not God, this kind of otherness. And so you could think of this as emptying a part of this light by contracting the light. In order to create the space for the creation. So we could call this contraction Zimtzung, which means contraction, and we can imagine it as a very, very simple point. And this is a void, a kind of hollow, empty space. If we look at this illustration from the past, we can see that at the top here there is the word Ein Sof, and all around the object, all around the circle, is this light. And in the middle of the circle is the idea of Ein Sof. So the light goes down this channel in a straight line from above to below in a kind of a void. And that corresponds to the fourth phase of creation. The fourth phase being this point in the center. So in the creation, we have the creator and the created substance, the creation. And there is a necessary detachment. So a detachment between the artist and the work. This point, let's say this point where there is no light, this is where the creation takes place. And in this place, we have really the idea of all creation, not just one work of art. We need to keep that in mind. So if we have all of creation inside this space, and this space is completely detached from the creator, we can start to see some very, very particular ideas about, for example, destiny and free will. because we have to analyze what is exactly the relationship between the creator and the created being. How much is predestined? How much is free will? If we're talking about free will, that means that this black space has no intervention, complete freedom. In the second case, we could say that everything is decided. It's a black space, but everything is already destined, a predestination. So everything moves in the way that it's planned. All actions, all situations within the permitted bounds. And instead, the free will, we have complete independence from this surrounding. So in the case of the artist, we have also the detachment that is necessary from the art and the artist. That detachment is how much intervention the artist exerts on the work of art. So, of course, there is the idea of protection, and this is where we go back to the varnish on the surface to try to conserve, to try to preserve and protect the painting. But it also, as a work of art, you're protecting it, you put it in a place where it might not get damaged, not leaving it in the rain, trying to conserve it. And of course, if possible, finding another owner. And so we have the attitude between the artist and the work of art. And this effort that the artist makes in trying to keep the artwork inside. Okay, and it's probably not good. I want to quote something from Yeketzel, also known as Ezekiel, chapter 36, verse 26. And I will give you a new heart, a new spirit will I put within you, and I will take away the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. So this new heart is an inclination. It's talking about an attitude that is renewing this organ of desire. And this is very interesting because that point that I showed you in the chart is actually called the stony heart. It's the same structure. It's the point of void. It's the point that each person has in their heart. It's called the stony heart. And if a person wants to understand if it's worthwhile for him or her to engage in some kind of activity, not in order to receive an award or some kind of reward, then we are working on the stony heart. This inclination is being analyzed. A person can't understand this because it's against our nature. We are born with the will to receive for ourselves, to have the pleasure of everything that is given us from the Creator. And this will to receive is complete. It's enough. We don't need anything else. But in order to start to change that inclination, let's say an egoistic inclination, a person has to work in faith. Faith above reason. That means that even though you don't understand how it's possible, you understand that by doing this, you are giving. And so the fourth phase again goes back to the will to bestow, the will to give. And we have the spiritual that comes to touch the material. We have the Creator and the creation, two complete different substances. And the question is, in our universe, in our world, in our creation, what you see around you, do you believe that it was created? Do you believe that the Creator created everything and then rested on the Sabbath and just stopped? Or was there an ulterior goal after the creation? Did God continue to intervene on the creation? Well, we have many, many different episodes. The episode of Noah, the episode of the flood. This is an intervention. Right? We read it as an intervention. And this happens every day in our life. Do we think that God is intervening? This is a question of faith, of course. And the Bible gives many, many, many episodes of God's continuous intervention, even in the New Testament. So what does this mean for the painter? Well, the painter created the work of art. And so how much intervention is going to come after you have finished, after you have put the brush down and you've decided that the painting is finished? What's left? Well, in a way, this fourth phase is quite unknown. It's something in progress. It's a little bit complicated. When you go to the Kabbalah and you study the Kabbalah, you will see that this fourth phase is full of complicated interactions and movements. I mean, millions, really. There's a shattering of the vessels. There's a lot of Tzimtzum, this contraction and things like that. If we just simplify and look at the artist, the last phase can be simply said, what is the relationship between the artist and the work that he has created? Every artist wants to show this work. Every artist wants to exhibit. So there is caring. There's putting the painting in front of the audience, in front of the people. And this is the reason that we bestow, we give this thing. And of course, someone might buy this and take it home. And what I want to try to talk about is a higher ideal, okay? In order to be able to approach this, I want to look at a couple of different works of art. This one is a book. It's called The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. And it's a very interesting book because it talks about a work of art, and the story is very, very interesting. You have, I don't want to talk about the book as much as I want to talk about the work of art. Okay, I want to talk about the painting that is used in the story, which is a real painting. It's a painting by Carol Fabricius, and this is the image. He's a Dutch painter of the Golden Age. He had incredible talent and very, very innovative techniques. He was born in Middenbemster in 1622, and he began his training with his father, and then he became a pupil of Rembrandt. All right, he learned from Rembrandt, and his works were so impressive that he actually influenced also Vermeer. And so we have a link between Vermeer and Rembrandt through this artist, Carol Fabricius. And this painting was completed in 1954, the same year that he tragically died in a massive gunpowder explosion. It destroyed a part of the city of Delft, where he lived and worked, and the explosion also killed the artist. 32 years old, a promising career really cut to the wick. And it deprived the art world of really a brilliant talent. So this artist, who died very, very young, left relatively few works of art. Actually, there are really only 4 that are completely attributed to the master's hand. So this is an episode of a work of art and an artist. I also want to talk about a film that is called The Words. And The Words is a film from 2012 12. It's a drama, and there's Bradley Cooper. The movie revolves around intertwined stories of three characters: the Bradley Cooper and Jeremy Irons, and then Olivia Wilde, which is the other character. So this main character is a writer. He dreams of a success, of course, like every writer, but always getting rejection. Frustrated, he stumbles upon an old manuscript that he buys in Paris in a vintage briefcase. He's captivated by this manuscript and in the end decides to rewrite it using his own hand, but he doesn't change anything. And the work of art becomes a critical success. He becomes famous, and later he actually comes in contact with the writer of the manuscript, who is now an old man, Jeremy Irons, and he is the true author. And so he meets the young plagiarist and confronts him about the reality. And he talks about this experience that he had that caused him to write this wonderful book. He never wrote another book again, but he lived to see that his book was printed and successful. Now, why am I talking about these two works? Well, because they give examples of how a work of art has its own life, has its own destiny. And I think it's interesting to see in both of these cases, you have the work of art who is actually attributed to another artist. So we can talk about copying the idea, copying the style, how artists do this, Picasso and Braque. Where is the real inspiration when an artist sets out? And then we have, in the other case, an artist who is relatively unknown, but yet his work of art, his 1 or 4 or 14 works of art that he produced in his entire life become exceptionally important to the art world. So the artwork is not a consumable product. It has a kind of a special status. Creativity is not a job. You're not creating something as a product. The product has your name, and this is problematic. The name becomes an asset for investors. Sometimes the investor is looking more at the name, and also the artist becomes narcissistic. The artist is trying to pump his name like branding in the market rather than actually thinking about the work of art. So what we see is a kind of bastardization of the creative process, and they can happen in any stage, from the inspiration to the work to the finish, any of the 4 phases. And so every act, although has a germ of the creative process. I'm not saying that maybe someone that is doing a work, some kind of work that is not so noble as painting or writing or something like that, but someone who is actually doing something quite interesting, there also is creativity in that. Graphic artist. It depends on the heart. That's why we go back to the stony heart. Is the creator creating art? Art has an elevated status. It kind of flows into a river. The river flows into the sea. The sea flows into the ocean. And so this work of art can be thought of that big black void that is filled with creation. There's no time, there's no space. These works of art do not exist in a temporal world. The art is part of an infinite, immense entity. And this means that the artist has to approach it with the right attitude. And the attitude is giving, of course. This is the second bestowal. We saw the second phase. We saw the second phase was the phase of giving. Now we see it in a different way. We see giving to this flow, giving to this extended reality. And this is a very, very important idea of bestowal.